For my first sermon, I decided that I'm going to talk about something that I've been feeling in my heart from the very moment that Sarah asked if I would do this. Complete abject terror. Now don't worry, I'm not going to do a fire and brimstone. I don't mean that kind of fear. So, you might be asking yourselves, what is fear? But that's a stupid question. You might as well ask yourself, what is the sky? Because we all know things, or we all have things that we're afraid of in this world. When we're children, we're afraid of the boogeyman in our closet or the monster under our beds. When we get to high school, we start worrying about test scores, dating, or getting into a good college. Even as adults, we have things that we're afraid of, like the war in the Middle East or the current economic crisis. Take my dad, for example. He's afraid of snakes, and he's afraid of flying, and he's afraid of being stuck on an airplane full of snakes. Me, myself, I'm actually afraid of the concept of being in dark or murky water. I just don't like the idea of what might be down there. And right now, you guys are the most terrifying people on the planet to me. But what should we do about fear? Well, I'm here to say that the Lord gives us plenty of ways to conquer such problems. The first and foremost, of course, being to turn to the Bible. The Bible's got plenty of things that it says about terror and being afraid. For example, there's Psalms 23, which is statistically the most quoted Bible verse in the world, which states, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The Lord is my..." "I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." Or we can also turn to Matthew 8:24 or Mark 4:37. Now, this is a story that we've been raised with. It tells the story of a nice little boat ride that Jesus and the disciples took. So nice, in fact, that Jesus decided that he was going to take a nap and rest. But of course, that nice little boat ride soon hit a not-so-nice storm. A storm so bad that waves were rocking the boat left and right, and everyone on board was terrified that they might die soon. But Jesus kept right on sleeping. And try as the apostles might, at first they couldn't wake him. And when they finally did, he looked at them like they were the biggest bunch of idiots on earth and said, "Why are you guys afraid? You know that our Father is here with us." And with a simple command, he calmed the storms, and they rode peacefully to the other side. But, nobody would really be afraid of a storm if they could just simply tell the storm to go away and it'd be done. So we can instead turn to Matthew 6:26 to see what the Bible has to say on a more personal fear, something that we would all encounter, especially in this day and age, the fear of what tomorrow might bring. Matthew 6:26 is when Jesus is talking, saying, "Why worry about tomorrow? God takes care of the birds and the plants, and yet we're more precious to him than they are." I mean, we're the only beings that he actually made in his own image. The only beings, in a way, he put his trademark on. So why would we think that he would take care of the birds and leave us to suffer? No, he's going to take care of us just fine, the same as he takes care of anything else. Now this leads me to the next powerful weapon that we have against fear, and that's prayer. I mean, we know that our Father is up there in heaven listening to us, and we know that he loves us. So why would we think that he wouldn't listen to us and try to help us out if we ask for help when we're afraid of something? Now, I've got a personal story that I can share about prayer coming through and helping, and it happened to me and my brother and a couple of our friends this past summer. We had traveled up to Baltimore for a vacation, for a convention, and it was the first night there. And our friend Kevin, who was the driver for the trip, he decided to stay back in the hotel room to take a nap. And the rest of us three, we decided that we were going to stay a little later and have fun at the convention, see all the sights that we could see, watch a couple of movies. And by the time we decided to head back to the hotel room, it was rather late. So late, in fact, that the shuttle that ran back and forth to the hotel and the convention center had stopped running. So we decided, we can walk back to the hotel. It's not a problem. It's a straight line. It's less than a mile away. We'll be fine. But it was as we walked that we realized that there was a really bad neighborhood between our hotel and the convention center. How do I know it was a bad neighborhood? Well, first of all, it's Baltimore. That place constantly ranks in on the top 20 list of the most dangerous cities in the United States, with its chief crimes being mugging and murder. So the place is pretty much entirely a bad neighborhood. Secondly, there wasn't a moment that went by as we walked where we didn't see the cops pulling someone, or with their lights running on the car, issuing a citation or making an arrest. Yet somehow, whenever we get closer to the cops and start to feel a little safe, that's when they decide to drive away. Now, it wouldn't have been that bad, except that my friend Jeff had at one point uttered the phrase, "If someone tries to mug us while we're here, I'm going to fight back." So needless to say, I didn't want to put us in a situation where that would need to happen. I didn't want to have to ditch Jeff and drag Drew away from, danger or something. And it wasn't a matter that we could have just slipped through and not, blended in and been fine. I mean, we stood out in like big sore thumbs in this place. We had backpacks on, we had geek t-shirts on, we had convention tags hanging from our necks. The only thing we were missing was a big sign that said, "We're tourists, please mug us." So as we're heading towards this dangerous neighborhood, getting closer and closer with each step, I start praying to God, saying, "Please, Father, help me to find a way out of this. Help me to find a way to keep me and my brother safe, and I guess Jeff safe too, although it's kind of in his head." And finally, God tells me that this is not the right course of action, that just walking through like we own the place was likely going to get us hurt. So I finally tell Jeff, I'm going back to the convention center, and we'll call a cab. I'll even pay for it. And on the way back, we run across some people that look an awful lot like us. They have the same t-shirts as us, they've got backpacks, tags, one guy's carrying a rolled up poster, and they're heading the same way as our hotel. So I stopped these guys and I asked them, "Are you guys heading back to the Holiday Inn Express over there?" And they said that they were, and asked if we were having trouble finding our way around the overpass neighborhood. To which I said that's the exact reason that I'm panicking at the moment. So they say, "Don't worry, we've done this like 10 times. And they lead us back that way, except they take a couple blocks, a route that takes us a couple blocks out of the way, but we didn't run into a single soul until we got back to the hotel room. I was thanking God the entire time we were walking back, thanking Him for sending those people to help us. I mean, this was 1 o'clock in the morning. The convention center was basically closed, and we hadn't seen any people like us the entire time we'd been wandering around aimlessly. Yet God watched out for us. He sent us guys to help get us there safely. Now, another great method that we can use to conquer our fears is to just face up to them. Now, can anyone in here right now name what the number one biggest fear in the United States is today? Anybody? I'm being serious, I'm honestly asking.
Public speaking.
That's exactly right. Public speaking is the number one fear. It outranks pain and death. So as Americans, we fear one another more than we fear anything. I mean, even famous people like Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, Oprah Winfrey, even Jay Leno actually have fear of public speaking. Even Leonardo DiCaprio once said at an award ceremony that he was hoping he didn't win just so he wouldn't have to get up and do an acceptance speech. Yet these people still step up every day and face their greatest fear. They've trained themselves over the years and forced themselves to encounter that fear time and time again so that they can get used to it. Even me myself, I used to be terrified of horror movies. Until one day I decided I didn't want to be, the chicken of the group and get laughed at by my friends. So I started watching scary movies every chance I got. I started reading scary books every chance I got. I would play scary video games with the lights off at night. And to this day, I've gotten to where I actually enjoy horror movies. But it's only been a moderate success because I still do that, looking over my shoulder for the rest of the night when I've done it. Even my dad, he may be afraid of snakes, but when there's one around, he doesn't shy away from it. He doesn't pass the responsibility to someone else and ask them to take care of it. He does what needs to be done, whether it be killing it or throwing it over that fence on the other side of the cemetery. Of course, he might shudder afterwards at the fact that there was even a snake, but that's not the important part. He'll still man up and do what needs to be done. But of course, one of the greatest people that we can look to when it comes to an example of conquering our fears and facing them is a story out of the Bible once again. Now, this isn't a story about a big, brave warrior. It was a story about a young man. A young man that, even though he might have been terrified, stood up to an opponent so great that an entire army refused to face him. I'm referring, of course, to the story of David and Goliath. Now, that's a story that we all know well enough. We've been told it our whole lives. Most kids, even kids of non-Christian families, probably know the story of David and Goliath. But have we ever actually stopped and looked at what was taking place here? I mean, David wasn't some big warrior. He was a youth, a kid, and not even a brawny kid. as Sarah's mentioned, he was a shepherd boy, which meant he would have been small, lanky, borderline on frail. Needless to say, he wouldn't have been the star quarterback in his high school football team. And he was going up against a literal giant. I mean, Goliath stood at what the Bible says was 6 cubits and a span. And we think that the metric system sounds confusing. But I looked up what that means, and that means that he stood at just under 10 feet tall. And it didn't end at that. I mean, this guy was armed to the teeth. He had a sword, he had a spear, he had a javelin. I don't know why he needed both a spear and a javelin, but he had them both to face this kid. And he had full armor. But what did David have? David had a stick, and he had a sling and 5 stones. And when I say a sling, I don't mean a slingshot where you can probably aim the thing. I mean a strap of leather that you twirl over your head and let go of and hope that it goes in the right direction. And he didn't have any armor. And why did he go into battle with these measly weapons? Because all the armor and the swords that the king had to offer him were too heavy for him to even walk in. So not only is he fighting way out of his weight class, but he's fighting essentially a tank. And yet his fear, or his love of the Lord is so powerful that it outweighs any fear that that big guy can hold over him. He still steps up and does what he needs to do because that guy's been bad-mouthing God, and David ain't going to stand for that. And from there, we all know the story, that David's courage is rewarded whenever he slays the beast with a single stone to the head, thus causing one of the biggest upsets in fighting history. But now, while it is true that this whole time I've been talking down about fear and explaining how to overcome it, the truth is that there's nothing wrong with feeling afraid of things, and that having courage doesn't mean that you completely lack fear. For example, a good Christian is often called a God-fearing Christian. Now, that doesn't mean that you're absolutely terrified of God. It's more fear in the regard of reverence for Him. And while it is true that David faced down a great foe, the Bible at no point says that he wasn't afraid of his opponent. I mean, he'd have to be crazy not to be. Courage is when you're afraid of something, but you've got such a great purpose that you overcome that fear. That you're able to do what you need to do despite being afraid. So while David did face down Goliath, he did so for a great purpose. So I'm not telling you guys to go and risk your lives. He didn't just decide, I'm going to fight a giant today. He did so because Goliath was bad-mouthing the Lord. And that's a pretty good reason to overcome your fears. Now, as I was saying, being scared isn't a sin. And in fact, fear is an emotion that God crafted for us the same as joy. It has many purposes for us. It helps keep us safe in times of danger. I mean, for people that have small children around, I'm sure that you'd much rather those kids be afraid of fire than decide that they want to play with it. It lets us know when we're in tight situations and helps us to think more clearly and stay focused on the situation. Like when me and my friends were in Baltimore. I didn't sit there and I was afraid, but that fear helped me to try to think, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Until God told me what I needed to do. I mean, fear can even be, at this point in our life, or at this point in human history, it's even become a thing of almost fun. I mean, even if it's just kids sitting around the campfire telling ghost stories to one another, or when you just have fun sneaking up behind a friend that doesn't know you're there and startling them, just so you guys can have a laugh about it later. The problem arises when Satan takes fear and uses it as a tool of his own. He tries to make us afraid to speak up about God in the public because we might be afraid of what others will think. Or he brings about situations just to torment us, just to enjoy watching us suffer from the fear that we'll feel. So while it is true that God gave us fear as a useful tool, that's why He just as equally gave us all the tools to overcome fear. He gave us prayer. He let us know that He's there for us when we need Him. He gave us an excellent guidebook in the Bible. I mean, this thing's been around for thousands of years and people still turn to it, so I'm fairly certain it's got pretty good advice packed in its pages. And he even designed fear to become less powerful over time. How just experiencing it over and over and over will force you to quit feeling, or will make you stop feeling as scared of the situation as you did the first time you encountered it. So always remember that while it's okay to feel fear, there's never any reason to let fear rule our lives. Let us pray.